ní sọ̀hún sí yín gbogbo ìgbà ni mo ń fún etí West Africa Democracy Radio.
Shakka muna a Najeriya. Ku saurari WADR.
West Africa Democracy Radio.
Je suis à Dakar, au Sénégal, et j'écoute la WADR 94.9 FM.
West Africa Democracy.
West Africa Democracy Radio.
We are West Africa Democracy Radio.
94.9 FM.
Dakar, Senegal. It's you speaking.
WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar, 7 p.m. in Abuja. Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. First, our top stories. Burkina Faso tightens regulation of humanitarian aid operations with new rules for relief organizations. AFRICOM hails Nigeria as a model in Africa's fight against terrorism. Gambian students protest rising homicide cases, call for the return of death penalty.
Bring back the death penalty. Bring back the death penalty. An eye for an eye. An eye for an eye. A life for life. A life for life. Blood for blood. Blood for blood. Blood for blood. Blood for blood.
Jenin blockade deepens humanitarian hardship in Western Mali as food and fuel shortages worsen.
Everything is in short supply in Yoru, but the most striking situation is at the market. When you go to buy a 50-kilogram bag of rice, you are usually forced to join long queues.
Please stay tuned for the details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Veronique Joy.
Thank you for joining us. Burkina Faso has adopted new regulations governing humanitarian assistance, introducing mandatory accreditation for aid organizations and tighter state oversight for relief operations. The government says the reforms are aimed at improving coordination, strengthening accountability, and ensuring humanitarian assistance is aligned with national priorities. Deborah Amour has the details in this report.
Adopted by the Council of Ministers, the new regulations apply to intergovernmental organizations, national and international non-governmental organizations, faith-based groups, and bilateral as well as multilateral partners. According to the Minister of Family and Solidarity, Lieutenant Colonel Pasowende Pelagi Kabore, the accreditation system will enable the government to better coordinate humanitarian operations and monitor where organizations are working across the country. The decree comes as Burkina Faso continues to grapple with a prolonged security crisis that has displaced millions and increased the number of humanitarian actors operating nationwide. Authorities say the reforms are intended to address challenges related to coordination, information sharing, accountability, and the management of humanitarian resources. Under the new rules, at least 60% of humanitarian funding must be directed towards early recovery and livelihood programs aimed at helping beneficiaries become self-reliant. The decree also introduces new ethical standards, including a ban on publishing images of vulnerable people receiving aid in a move the government says is intended to protect their dignity. Officials say the new framework will strengthen oversight of humanitarian assistance while improving its effectiveness and ensuring it supports the country's development priorities.
That was Deborah Amour with that report. The United States Africa Command, AFRICOM, has described Nigeria as a model in the fight against terrorism in Africa, citing the country's growing collaboration with the United States and recent military gains against extremist groups. The commendation came during a high-level engagement in Abuja as Nigeria continues efforts to combat insurgency, banditry, and other security threats across the country. Our correspondent in Abuja, Yechenu Sasitu, has more.
The commander of the United States Africa Command, General Michael Langley, made the remarks during a meeting with Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, at the Defense Headquarters in Abuja. General Langley, who is on an official visit to Nigeria, said the country's counter-terrorism efforts have become a reference point for other African nations confronting similar security challenges. According to AFRICOM, the partnership between the United States and Nigeria has grown significantly in recent years, with cooperation spanning intelligence sharing, military training, logistics support, and joint operations against terrorist groups. On his part, Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Musa welcomed the continued partnership, noting that international collaboration remains vital in confronting terrorism and transnational crimes. The visit comes amid renewed military offensives against Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters as security forces intensify operations in the northeast while responding to attacks in other parts of the country. Although Nigeria has recorded significant successes in recent months, including the rescue of hundreds of abducted civilians and the elimination of several terrorist commanders, security analysts say sustained regional cooperation and efforts to address the root causes of extremism remain critical to achieving lasting peace. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
Elsewhere in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a treatment trial for the Bundibugyo strain of the current Ebola outbreak has enrolled its first patient. This phase of the trial marks a significant development as there are currently no approved vaccines or treatments for the Bundibugyo strain, which has infected more than 1,400 people and claimed at least 438 lives. The World Health Organization says drug supplies are sufficient for the study, while efforts are underway to ensure patients can continue accessing the treatments if they provide safe and effective.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Students of the State University of the Gambia took to the streets on Thursday, demanding tougher action against rising violent crimes, including the reintroduction of the death penalty. The protest follows a string of fatal stoppings, among them the killing of a former University of the Gambia Students' Union leader, Yunus Sambai. Demonstrators delivered petitions to the Ministries of Justice, Interior and Health, urging the government to adopt stronger measures to curb the growing wave of homicides. Christopher Teacher has more.
Bring back the death penalty. Bring back the death penalty. An eye for an eye. An eye for an eye. A life for life.
Marching through the streets of Banjul with placards and chanting slogans to the country's National Assembly, the students demanded justice for former student leader Yunus Mbai and other young Gambians who have been killed in recent weeks in a series of fatal stabbings. Mohammed Ngalan is one of the leaders of the protests.
The continued occurrence of preventable violent crimes undermines public confidence in the country's security institutions and calls for immediate and decisive action.
The protesters called for swift prosecution of murder suspects and urged the government to reintroduce the death penalty, arguing that stronger punishment is needed to deter violent crime.
The death penalty is the most effective deterrent factor for all states and everywhere. So why Gambia? Why are we hell-bent on protecting and feeding the murderer? Why are we hell-bent on protecting and feeding the killers? Why are we hell-bent on continuously victimizing our fellow Gambians? Either one of us could be victims tomorrow.
Ahead of the protest, Minister of Information Dr. Ismaila Cisse said the government would not tolerate the recent wave of violent crime and assured the public that those responsible would be brought to justice.
Now we are going to have a zero compromise attitude on crime in this country. And I think the IDP has already discussed that with the state. Zero compromise. We cannot allow that to happen in this country. And the government will take all the measures necessary to ensure we protect our citizens.
Capital punishment remains a subject of debate in the Gambia, where executive executions were last carried out under former President Yahya Jammeh. The recent rise in violent crime has renewed cause for its return.
Blood for blood, 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 respect for respect, respect for respect.
That was Christopher Aticho with that report. More details in our guest interview segment. In Mali, the blockade imposed by the Group for the Support of Islam and Muslims, JANIM, on the western town of Nioro continues to weigh heavily on residents. Access to necessities and food items, particularly rice, is becoming increasingly difficult while supply trucks along the route remains blocked. Fuel shortages are also worsening the situation, disrupting electricity supply and slowing down economic activity. Francis Boniface has details in this report filed by our Bamako correspondent Aliu Cham.
Residents of Nioro are facing growing hardship as a blockade imposed by JANIM continues to restrict the movement of goods into the town. For many families, buying a bag of rice now means spending hours in long queues, only to find that the limited supplies available are insufficient to meet demand. One resident who asked not to be identified for security reasons describes the situation.
Everything is in short supply in Nioro, but the most striking situation is at the market. When you go to buy a 50-kilogram bag of rice, you are usually forced to join long queues. This is because only a limited quantity is made available each day, and once that allocation is exhausted, no further supplies can be sold.
Beyond the shortage of food, fuel has also become increasingly scarce.
Electricity and water supply are no longer stable as fuel shortages persist. All fuel stations in general are closed. Where fuel is available, the price of a liter has surged to between 2,500 and 3,000 CFA francs.
The shortages have led to more frequent power cuts, disrupting businesses and making daily life even more difficult for residents. With no immediate end to the blockade in sight, many families in Nioro are being forced to adapt to worsening living conditions as concerns grow over the humanitarian and economic impact of the prolonged siege.
A report filed by our Bamako correspondent Aliu Cham and presented by Francis Boniface. Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama has sworn in Dr. Pamela Graham as the country's new Auditor General, the first woman to hold the position. The appointment comes amid growing public concern over corruption and calls for stronger oversight of public finances and government spending. Speaking at the swearing-in ceremony, President Mahama stressed the importance of safeguarding the independence of the Auditor General's office.
In a developing economy such as ours, where every public investment must yield measurable benefits for our people, the role of the Auditor General becomes even more critical. Effective auditing strengthens investor confidence, it improves governance, and reinforces public trust in government and state institutions. Dr. Graham, your appointment comes at a time when our citizens' expectations for transparency and accountability are at an all-time high. Ghanaians rightly expect every public institution to demonstrate value for money, prudent stewardship of national resources, and higher standards of integrity. As you assume office today, you do so not in service of any government or any political party or any individual, but in the service to the Constitution and the people of Ghana. The independence of your office is fundamental to the credibility of our governance system. That independence must always be protected, and equally, it must always be exercised responsibly, professionally, and fairly. An Auditor General must be guided solely by facts, evidence, and the law. Your reports must command public confidence because they are objective, balanced, and beyond reproach.
That was Ghanaian President John Dramani Mahama speaking there. Healthcare delivery in central Liberia could face major disruptions after the National Health Workers Union of Liberia issued an ultimatum to the government over a prolonged labor dispute at one of the country's major referral hospitals. The union warns that failure to resolve the crisis could trigger the closure of major health facilities before escalating into a nationwide strike. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
Healthcare services in Bon County, North Central Liberia, are under serious threat as the National Health Workers Union of Liberia has given the government until Sunday to resolve the long-running dispute at Phoebe Hospital, one of Liberia's leading referral facilities. Speaking to aggrieved workers, the union's vice president for operations, Simon Morris, rejected any move to replace striking health workers with students, insisting that the trainees are not qualified to provide patient care.
You have time to act now. We are starting with Phoebe Hospital. We will shut it down also. Phoebe administration should not call for students to come to Phoebe Hospital. It's unacceptable. They are not licensed. They are not qualified. We cannot put the life of our people in danger. We will not allow it.
Meanwhile, the president of the Phoebe Hospital Health Workers Union, Moses Davis, says workers have been waiting for months for the outcome of a government-backed investigation into their grievances.
From January up to present, when this committee was set, they asked for 21 days. You asked for 21 days, we've gone almost 3 months. Whatsoever has happened here is been overdue. What we said and what we're going to do, if they fail this time around, it's not a go slow. It's a complete shutdown.
Phoebe Hospital says Bong, Lofa, Nima, and the surrounding communities. A shutdown could severely disrupt healthcare services for thousands of patients across central Liberia. At the time of filing this report, the Ministry of Health had not yet publicly responded to the union's latest ultimatum. For Newslink, Abraham Parker reporting from Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Burkina Faso tightens regulation of humanitarian aid operations with new rules for relief organizations. AFRICOM hails Nigeria as a model in Africa's fight against terrorism. Gambian students protest rising homicide cases, call for the return of death penalty, and Jenin blockade deepens humanitarian hardship in Western Mali as food and fuel shortages worsen. Still ahead in the news, we have the guest interview on the sports news. Stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Thank you for staying with us. In Togo, the authorities have conducted an assessment of the communities affected by floods, including material resources mobilized and measures taken to manage the crisis. So far, no deaths have been reported, but authorities recorded several damages, including displacement. An update of the assessment was provided on Thursday during a meeting organized by the National Agency for Water Protection. Among the participants was Jean-Luc Asiakoli, Communications Officer of the Gulf 4 municipality in Lomé. He explains the outcome of the meeting.
Ce qui concerne la situation globale, après ces pluies torrentielles.
This concerns the overall situation after these torrential rainfalls of June 28 to the 29th with a threshold at 50 millimeters. But today, according to the National Agency for Civil Protection, the threshold has been exceeded and reached 200 millimeters. The agency reported 3 deaths, 2 in Lomé and 1 in Tablico. In the commune of Gulf 4, several houses are flooded and several families have lost material goods. A lot of damage has been recorded, and we are trying at the town hall level to provide some relief to our populations through our major means.
À travers nos maigres moyens, nos populations. Pour l'heure, au niveau de la commune du Golfe 4.
For now, in the Gulf 4 district, we haven't reached that point yet. And I don't think the National Agency for Civil Protection has reached that point either. We have always urged our residents not to build in flood-prone areas. But the fact is, as you say, it happens every year. We are digging in the desert, but I think that at some point, we risk resorting to a radical method, which is to completely raise the flood-prone areas to see how we do it.
Inondable, pour voir comment on fait.
That was Jean-Luc Asiakoli, Communications Officer of the Gulf 4 municipality in Lomé. In Guinea, the Court for the Repression of Economic and Financial Crimes has delivered its verdict in the appeal trial of former Prime Minister Ibrahima Kassori Fofana. The court cleared him of charges of embezzlement of public funds but found him guilty of illicit enrichment and money laundering. His sentence has been reduced from 5 years to 3 years and 9 months in prison, along with a fine of 2 billion Guinean francs. Here is Sankule Janko with a report filed by our Conakry correspondent Cherno Alpha Ibrahim Abalde.
The Appeals Chamber of the Court for the Repression of Economic and Financial Offences partially overturned the earlier judgment against the former Prime Minister Dr. Ibrahima Kassori Fofana. He was cleared of embezzlement charges but found guilty of illicit enrichment and money laundering. His defense lawyer, Maitre Sidiki Berete, criticized the ruling.
We
believe in our client's innocence. He was wrongly held on charges of illicit enrichment because the amount seized from the two accounts has neither been proven by the court, by the prosecution, or by the civil party to originate from the Guinean state. Kassori is a national figure. He served as Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and has been involved in the governance of Guinea for nearly 40 years. If Mr. Kassori had benefited from 30 billion as sovereign funds, the amount seized from his accounts does not even reach 20 billion. To claim illicit enrichment in these conditions is not consistent. There are contradictions in the reasoning.
However, the civil party welcomed the decision, saying the ruling marks an important step in the fight against corruption and economic crimes in Guinea. Following the verdict, both the defense and the prosecution have filed appeals before the Supreme Court.
That was Sankule Janko with that report.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
The recent surge in homicide cases, particularly fatal stabbings, has heightened public concern over violent crime in the Gambia. The killings, including that of a former University of the Gambia Students' Union leader, Yunus Ambai, have sparked widespread debate about public safety and prompted calls for tougher measures, including the reintroduction of the death penalty. To discuss the recent incidents, the police response, and what is being done to curb violent crime, I spoke to Modu Musa Sisao, Public Relations Officer of the Gambia Police Force.
In recent times, especially in this month, the number of incidents leading to death, especially as a result of stabbing, has increased. In general, it doesn't mean that the incident rate of crime in the country has increased. And I think this is where the debate is. People are saying the country is not safe, there are a lot of crimes and XYZ. As far as we are concerned, the number of crime in terms of rate has not increased, it's actually reduced. But this specific crime, which is part of the crime in general, that is stabbing incident, yes, of recent we have seen a lot of that happening, and it's a concern to everybody. It's a concern to us, a concern to the security, and to notice the pattern, the Office of the Inspector of Police has instructed all regional commissioners across the nation to heighten police patrols and also visibilities. But the concern is that if you look at some of these cases, you realize that most of the cases would actually occur in private places, let's say in compounds, at homes and apartments. So these are not organized crime. This is the misconception people might have, because when you say crime, is it organized? Is it like people went out to kill people? But the circumstances, when we looked at them, we realized that these are between people who knew each other, people who have business together, people who are mutual friends in one way or the other. Looking at all of this, or putting all of this into context, you realize that there is little that the police could do at that material time, because it is spontaneous. And I don't think this constitutes what we call insecurity in the country. Naturally, police would not be in people's garages. Naturally, police would not be posted in people's compound. These are people's privacy and all of that.
But let's speak on prosecution. There have been a lot of issues regarding prosecuting these individuals on time. What are the issues that the police is currently facing regarding this?
I don't think people should fault the police for this. So what police would do is, naturally, these are capital offenses. Murder is a capital offense. So when people are alleged to have committed murder, we investigate. And when we investigate and we arrest, and most of the cases, almost more than 90% of the cases are the suspects suspects are arrested. They are investigated. A case file is built. Now, these people are mentioned. For example, we know you cannot keep anybody more than 72 hours. So what we do is we take the case, the initial investigation to court and mention the matter to court that this person has committed this, and under the circumstances he should not be bailed because we need to continue investigation. And also the matter should also be transferred to the High Court. So mostly these people are now remanded at Mile 2 while investigation is ongoing. When investigation is done, the matter is transferred to the High Court. And at the High Court, the police do not prosecute. The police only prosecute at the lower court. That is the magistrate court. So when we are done, we transfer the file to the state. And that's where the state councils will take it up.
As you mentioned, many Gambians say they are becoming increasingly concerned about their safety. What assurances can you give the public that the police are on top of the situation?
We have our elements all around the country. We are on patrols, we are on visibility patrols, we have our day, night, evening patrols, vehicles going in and out. And our stations are open to everybody. Anybody who sees anything, suspects anything, who has an issue with anybody, and I think it's important for people not to take the law into their own hands. And I think that's what is important, very important. If you have an issue, you have a problem with anybody, it's better you go and report it to the police.
Modu Musa Sisa, Public Relations Officer of the Gambia Police Force, speaking there. All right, time for some sports news. The final 3 matches of the 2026 FIFA World Cup round of 32 will be played later today and early hours of tomorrow, with 4 African teams still in contention for places in the last 16. Egypt will face Australia, while defending champions Argentina will take on Cape Verde later on. Ghana will then meet Colombia on tomorrow for the final round of the 16 spot. Morocco has already secured its place in the last 16 after defeating Netherlands on penalties. Egypt, Cape Verde and Ghana will now be hoping to join the Atlas Lions as Africa's remaining representatives in the knockout stage. A record 9 African teams reached the round of 32 following the tournament's expansion to 48 teams, but South Africa, Ivory Coast, DR Congo, Senegal and Algeria have already been eliminated. But with several African heavyweights already out of the tournament, Ghana will look to keep the continent's World Cup dream alive when the Black Stars face Colombia in a winner-takes-it-all round of 32 clash in Kansas City in the early hours of Saturday. Ahead of tomorrow's game, we have been sampling the views of Ghanaians for their predictions of the game.
Ose Ghana, Ghana, oh! Nice winning 2-1.
My prediction is Ghana 2, Colombia 1, because you have Thomas Partey, Semenyo and Inaki Williams.
So for once, I want us to either bench Ayu, because he seems to be holding back most of our balls when we are going in front. And then the truth is, there's a chance we can win, but it will depend on how good we play and how good our defense is. But with me, I'm predicting a 1-0 for Ghana.
I think this match between Colombia and Ghana, my prediction is going to be based on their performance. Now, in the World Cup, I think Colombia is doing well. Yeah, when it comes to the World Cup, Colombia, that country, they are good. So I think over here, it's going to be something like 1-0, yeah. 1-0 against Colombia. Ghana is going to score 1.
I think Ghana can score 2 goals against Colombia, 2-0. So
this match is going to be a very, very, very tough one because the Colombians are coming with a very good and brilliant form, But in our previous match against England and Panama, I believe that if we can play with that same energy and that same discipline, I think this match we are going to win by 2-1 or 1-0.
All right, those were the voices of Ghanaians as they face Colombia tomorrow. And we have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Mauduju for the technical assistance. Remember, you can also listen to us via mobile application WADR, available in the App Store as well as Google Play Store. I am Veronica Njai. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening.